So if everyone could start adding their name and affiliation to the chat, that would be wonderful. And please try to chat with everyone so folks that are not panelists can see who has joined us today. Commissioner, lovely to see you. Sorry, I didn't mean to catch you mid-sip.
A little coffee break for the afternoon. Good afternoon, everyone. Nice to see you.
Good afternoon to you too.
All right. And we should start in a little bit. We are only at 35 participants at the moment. All righty, I hope everyone has had a wonderful summer. It's good to see all your faces. For those of you just joining, if you could just add your name and affiliation to the chat and make sure that you chat with everyone so folks that are not panelists can see who's joining us today. And Commissioner, I'm going to pass the talking baton over to you.
Great. Thanks so much, Addison. You feel like we've got a plurality to join?
I think we are gaining speed here.
Okay, terrific. Well, thank you, everyone. And thanks for joining a special joint meeting of the Workforce and Advisory Councils. I think this is the second time, at least in my time at EEC, that we've done this, and in an attempt to basically, if we have things we need to talk to both councils about, we might as well bring you together instead of having, there's a lot of overlap in membership. And so it makes sense for us to kind of do things together. So, and I know we first scheduled it in the morning, and I'll tell you why we had to change that, because it's very exciting. And thank you for also accommodating the afternoon shift. So we may not need the whole 3 hours, but we might. So our plan for today's council meetings, usual welcome introductions. I just have a few updates for everyone. We wanted to share, last time we met, the budget hadn't been finalized yet, so we want to walk through. I'm sure many of you have spent time at different settings hearing about the final budget, but wanted to present to you our view on where the final budget landed for FY26 and what we're looking at. Then we spent some time in our last meeting talking about our 5-year strategic action plan, which is a statutory requirement that the agency produce every 5 years. And we are in that 5-year period with the current strategic action plan ending at the end of this calendar year, and the new one that we've been working on. So we took your feedback from our last meeting, and we've been having stakeholder interviews and continuing to build research and working with our colleagues in the task force and across state government and at EEC and our board to refine that strategic action plan. So we have kind of an update on where we are on that, a little bit more engagement from all of you, which is also required by statute. So we are ticking that box, as well as getting meaningful input from you today as well. We did have a special meeting of the EEC board in August. Many of you may be aware, really dedicated to the Commonwealth Cares for Children program, meeting some new statutory requirements about the formula for that. So we want to update you on what we told the board. We are in the middle of a public comment period, so we want to make sure everyone is aware of that, and we would love to hear from you during that public comment period. So we'll get a little bit more into the details of that, and then conclude the meeting by just reviewing what the meeting dates are for these councils over the coming year. So I came from, and I started my comments this morning just feeling I was brimming with pride and joy today, where I got to participate in a public announcement of a new $6 million federal grant for apprenticeships in early education and out of school time in Massachusetts. It is the largest grant that the Division of Apprenticeship Standards or the Commonwealth has ever received for apprenticeships, and it's in early education and care. And as we talked about today, 3 years ago, including our workforce council, we were staring down what was a pretty bleak picture in terms of the workforce crisis, and we still have huge challenges among our workforce, and wages are too low and we have capacity, but we have made an enormous amount of progress. And I remember when we first brought to the Workforce Council and we had a board group, we really thought, apprenticeships could be a great model for early education and care. We have a lot of incumbent workforce, we have adult learners, we have folks who want to come into the field, but there might not be a professional pathway outside of higher education that they would be really interested in. And we had a convening in Worcester, and we all scratched our heads and said, how could we make this known thing that works in the trades around apprenticeships work in early education? And at the time, we had kind of a small handful of them happening around the Commonwealth, but they were sort of all leading in different places. They weren't necessarily standardized. And 3 years later, we have 8 registered apprenticeships for early education and care in Massachusetts. I think we have 1,800 participants who've been going through those apprenticeship programs. Today's announcement is going to be 275 more apprentices, in addition to an intermediary to support the technical assistance. And that really was because of many of the partners I see here. So many of our partners across the Commonwealth who sat down and figured out how to help run apprenticeship programs. And today we were at 4Kids Only. I don't know if Brianna's on, but with a bunch of the apprenticeships that graduated, the first ever in the country full-time apprenticeship program for after school and out of school time professionals. And many of these folks didn't see this as a career pathway. And now they are group leaders. 3 of them just got promoted to be site leaders, and they see it as a real true career pathway, something they wanted to see as a career pathway, but didn't have an opportunity. And I think one of the things I'm so proud that we sort of came together and figured out how to sort of adapt what had been this known structure. And our colleagues at Labor and Workforce Development worked like our sleeves rolled up with all of you to figure out how to make it work in early education. And just really, really proud of that work. And all those apprentices are now moving along their professional craft pathway. They talked about everything they were learning and how they were able to learn it in the morning and apply it in the classroom. And so kids are getting better at early education and care and after school programming, but also it's helping all the parents who can go to work now. So as we said, early education and school time apprentices are kind of like a twofer. So pretty excited about that. And then on Saturday, we have an event where we're going to be announcing the first round of the Family Child Care Capital Grants. So the first ever Family Child Care Capital Grants supported by the legislature in last year's budget. And we will also be announcing the second round. So I don't have that information right now, but after Saturday, we'll make sure everyone's aware of that. So all the first round grantees have been notified, and we are going to be able to notice the second round. So that's also an exciting event happening on Saturday in Worcester. And then we have a board meeting next week. And on the agenda for that, we will be reminding them about the FY26 budget. So a little bit of a repeat of this. We already talked with them about the Commonwealth Cares for Children program. But we'll also be talking with them about our strategy this year for supporting career pathways. And please do tune in. We are very, very committed to the Career Pathways program, and funding for that has shifted a lot over the last couple of years, but we do have some funds that are set aside for scholarship dollars, and we have some flexible funds that are set aside for within the Fair Share supplemental budget that passed that Eric will talk about in a minute. And so we are working very hard to make that program whole and make sure there's no disruption for the community colleges, the faculty, and the students who rely on that program as a pathway in and a pathway up. So we'll talk a little bit about that because it requires action by both our board and the Board of Higher Education. So we're going to get that rolling so we can make sure that program is as whole as possible for this year. And then we're going to have a pretty substantial update from the task force. So many of you are probably aware the task force had a very public first year. We were out doing listening sessions and lots of events. And this year has been marked more by like rolling up our sleeves internally and working across agencies. So be happy to have the board, and for any of you who can come or can tune in, hear about the meaningful work that's happening across state government around childcare and early education. And I would say the apprenticeship program I talked about in the beginning is a real example of that, where our colleagues in labor and workforce development completely showed up for childcare and early education. And I think you'll see when you hear an update from the task force that we're seeing that across state government in big ways and small. So excited to have that be on the agenda as well. Okay, with that, I think concludes my updates, unless anyone has any questions or areas I didn't cover that you'd like to hear. I am going to turn it over to Eric Hansen, who's our Chief Financial Officer. I'm pretty sure you met him at the last meeting, to walk us through what happened in the budget.
Good afternoon, everybody, and thank you, Commissioner. Hope everyone's doing well now that we're back into fall after the Labor Day weekend. I have a presentation to share. Addison, is that something you'd like me to bring up? Oh. Wonderful. All right, thank you. So as we enter, well, as we're about entering our third month into the new fiscal year, we're happy to have received our FY26 funding from the legislature. As many of you know, it's a long process to develop a budget, going all the way back into January when the governor filed her FY26 budget recommendation, and then iterating in the springtime, going through the House and the Senate to put forth their recommendations. And then finally in the summer, as we had filed in June and signed in a few days later, was our conference budget and what became the General Appropriations Act and the final FY26 budget. So just as a reminder, you can go to the next slide, please. Thank you. Some of the governor's biggest priorities for early education and care were filed in her House 1 budget in January, including the CPPI program, supporting CCFA, so our subsidy program for childcare, as well as supporting our providers and other childcare establishments through Commonwealth Cares for Children, or C3. Now, with the final budget, we'll go to the next slide, please. We'll see kind of how the legislature took those recommendations and put them into action. So overall, EEC is funded this year at just over $1.7 billion, which is about a 10% increase from our budget last year. So inclusive in that is some highlighted programs are $475 million for the C3 program. And this takes the governor's recommendation, so level fund C3 to FY25. And it is split between both general appropriations, which are from the general fund, just tax collections, what you would think of as your regular funding sources from state government, as well as fair share revenue, and the majority is on that. We also have just over $1 billion to support families and children and our providers through our CCFA program, Child Care Financial Assistance, for both income eligible and our DTA, DCF related families. CPPI is funded at $20.5 million, and this is a bit below what the governor has recommended. I'll get to that in a minute. Our administration and quality line items, so these two lines, these accounts, are funded at $57 million and include a $5 million earmark for early childhood educator scholarships, an important program for supporting the professional development of our educators. And then another item I want to highlight for this group in particular is our Career Pathways program. So as Commissioner mentioned, it was funded a bit below what the governor had filed. So it's funded at $3 million this year. EEC is working with its partners, both at the board as well as within state government, on ways to make this program whole and fully funded at $7.5 million, something we'll be discussing moving forward. And there's also, won't go into too much detail, but some other funding below $10 million for mental health grants and other programmatic earmarks.
I'll let Eric continue here, but I just want to point out some of the key watch areas that that we are keeping an eye on, and we'll be talking about over the course of the year for sure. So first of all, let's start with the great news: 475 million for Commonwealth Cares for Children, and we are so thrilled that this program is now codified in statute and continues at the 475, which is a level fund from last year, and allows us to continue the good work. We'll hear a little bit about where we are on sort of the growing maturity work that we're doing around that program. So we're excited about that. A couple areas we're watching, as you know, there's been a lot of dynamics in the caseloads. So we did have a supplemental budget that passed this year to cover some deficiencies in that account. We are feeling pretty good about the amount of funding that are available in terms of making sure we can continue to serve the existing children and families who are being served by that program, and likely some projected increase from DTA and DCF. We don't anticipate this funding level enabling us to reopen access to the income eligible program at this time, but that's obviously something that we are going to be very, very closely tracking, and we're working with our legislative colleagues as well as our colleagues at ANF. We are thrilled that we're going to be able to continue support for all of our existing Commonwealth Preschool Partnership Initiative grantees and programs and communities. We had a very ambitious goal in the Healy Driscoll administration about expanding that to new communities and taking existing planning grantees, fully funding them. Those are not in the plans at this funding level at this moment, but it's an area that we will, again, continue to seek opportunities for growth around that CPPI program. We had an amazing visit to see a series of CPPI communities on our CPPI Roadshow late spring and over the summer. And it's doing some amazing things in communities, expanding access, reaching kids with special education needs in their truly least restrictive setting, really committed to seeing that program expand. Career Pathways is obviously an area that we've been committed to, and I think we do have a solution for this year, which is good. And then our administrative accounts. I know we talked about that with all of you. Again, Eric will talk a little bit about, we are quite concerned about the reductions in our administrative accounts in terms of both IT modernization and operations, staffing capacity, and continuing to kind of build the agency infrastructure to support all the good programmatic work. We do have a commitment to kind of continuing our support, and we have some flexibility through the Fair Share supplemental budget that we're hoping to lean into. But that will be an area that we will probably be discussing in terms of going into the next fiscal year and making sure that we can sustain all of the good gains we've had to build a truly responsive, data-informed, and incredibly talented EEC team. So those are the kind of our kind of key watch areas. So we'll be keeping an eye on the caseload. I know it's on top of everyone's mind. Our administrative capacity and making sure that we continue the great progress we've had there. CPPI, and then Career Pathways. So Eric, I'll probably think of something else I probably should have told them. So I'll return to you, the baton, and then pick up after.
All right, thank you very much. Yeah, so as Commissioner stated too, with the caseload is a watch area for us, but again, something that we keep close tabs on month to month. And administration on quality line items, to revisit that. It was functionally a $3.5 million reduction from what the governor had filed. It does take people and resources to operate these programs and do this good work. So again, something that we'll be managing and looking forward to working with partners within state government to help us do so with some of the fair share funding as well. Speaking of that, if you go to the next line, so here you'll see between these two slides that Edison just showed are a table that speak to what was filed both in the GAA, in the governor's recommendation for House 1, And so GAA in 25, governor's recommendation for 26, and then the final budget for 26 far on the right. You can see a full list of the General Appropriations Act or the budget if when this is released. You can click that link. But I'll draw your attention to the top line here, 1596-2410. So this is child care grants to providers, the C3 program. You'll see that the majority of that $475 million in funding is funded through the fair share line item, as well as another line item, child care supports, 83 million to continue supporting our CCFA caseload. If you go to the next slide, please, we'll talk a little bit about the FY25 fair share supplemental budget. So in FY25, the fair share revenues exceeded projections. So in January, Governor filed alongside her 26 budget, a supplemental budget to the tune of $150 million for early child care to help support building the workforce, help support access for families, enact some of the recommendations that were built and taken in from around the task force work, as well as continue to support CPPI program and grow that over the course of 3 years. The final fair share budget that was passed by the legislature was about just under a third of what the governor had filed, but still some significant investments. $20 million for rate increases for our CCFA providers in FY26. Something that too will be enacted this year and will be annualized into out years. $8 million for staff to support our early educators in the CCFA program. Another $7.5 million for loan repayment for early education and care staff members. And about $10 million for generalized capacity building that the commissioner mentioned earlier. And again, we're working through a process called spending plans right now with the Executive Office of Administration and Finance on how to best use this funding to support the agency's operations and as well as out in the field to do the programming that our families' children rely on. That is it. So I'll turn it back to you, Addison, for the rest.
Okay, I didn't see any questions in the chat. Do folks have questions for Eric or for me? Again, you've probably all heard the budget presentation or had a chance to kind of metabolize what ended up in the budget a few months over the last couple months since we had a nearly on-time budget. Which also brings me to want to say, and I know we have several legislative colleagues on today, that it's been an incredible partnership with the legislature, the support and growth for early education over the last several years. So we couldn't be more grateful for the support from our legislative colleagues showing up on a meeting like this and supporting an incredible budget for us. So Representative Lewis, I think Representative Plouffe are here, and I know Michelle Liscio also has joined us. So thank you to our legislative colleagues for your incredible support. Any other budget questions? None? Wow. Okay. You have, like, it's old news. Okay. We'll be talking about 27 soon enough. Okay. Great. So now we're going to go from like this year to the broader year. So we have been really fortunate to have Emily Connor-Simons, and some of you probably had a chance to meet with her one-on-one or in groups as we've been building out our strategic action plan. So I'm going to turn things over to her to let you all know where we are on that. I'll just remind you, and I'm sure she'll say it too, that it's been our overall strategy around this strategic action plan that we are heading in the right direction in so many areas. There's a lot of continued work to do, whether it's supporting additional access for our families, reaching more of our workforce with educational or professional development opportunities and higher wages, continuing to grow and stabilize the C3 program. But we really believe that we have the right levers in place. And so our approach around the strategic action plan has been around go further, go deeper, continue to execute in the areas and opportunities for growth in the areas that we haven't had an opportunity to really focus on. But we sort of unpacked a lot of things at EEC over the last several years. So finishing regulations, updating them, continuing to modernize our IT systems. And all of that kind of sits on the top of the work many of you have done, whether it's the Economic Review Commission report, our friends at the Mass Taxpayers Foundation who are churning out smart, accurate reports about our system, the Boston Foundation, their partnership and looking at the family experience, and obviously meeting with many of our stakeholders on a really regular basis. So, so this is about sustaining and executing and going deeper and further. So with that, Emily, take it away.
Thank you so much, Commissioner. Hi, everyone. Lovely to see many of you again. I'm excited to share an update on where we are in our strategic planning process and also really spend some time getting your input and feedback on what we've drafted so far. So to start us off, I'm going to sort of walk you through again some of the slides that I shared at our June meetings to sort of lay out how we are approaching this work, and then really hoping to save most of our time today to really collect your feedback on the goals and work streams that we've started brainstorming. So on this slide, you will see kind of at a high level what our timeline has looked like this year for developing this 5-year strategic action plan. So in the spring, we did a lot of internal conversations to begin drafting some 5-year goals and activities of the work that we thought needed to happen between 2026 and 2030. This summer, we started collecting some external feedback from stakeholders on those goals and work streams. Several of you were involved in those conversations, so we thank you for the feedback that you've shared already, and hopefully you will see that reflected in the updated slides that I'm sharing today. Right now, we are in this fall period where we are bringing these goals and work streams to you all for your input and feedback to make sure that they feel reflective of the work that you're doing and the priorities you think that EEC should have over the next few years. Once we collect your feedback today and our board's feedback next week, we will be sending our final draft up through for review and hopefully bringing it to our board for a vote in December. So with that, I want to briefly kind of walk you through the slides that I shared in June to just sort of remind you what inputs and kind of foundations we're thinking about in the strategic planning work. So on the next slide, you will see our 5 strategic objectives. So these objectives are really kind of the guiding force for the work that we're doing, thinking about the impact that we want to have. And we're using these strategic objectives to really organize our 5-year strategic action plan. So we have a section on family access, a section on program quality, workforce supports, program stability, and that internal agency infrastructure that the commissioner mentioned earlier. So as we go through today, you will see we're going to have some goals and activities for each of these areas to really represent the different stakeholders that we're working with and areas of work that we're focusing on. Next slide. So some of the other things that are really have been informing this work is a lot of our external engagement that we've done over the last several years. So whether we're talking about task force and the listening sessions that were involved in that, the advisory and workforce councils, our data advisory councils and commissions, the regular wonderful engagement that Eugenia and others at EEC are doing with folks in the field on a regular basis, as well as these engagements that we've been having around revising our regulations. We're really building a lot of this work and a lot of the goals and work streams that you'll see on our engagement with the field. On the next slide, you'll also see our research, how the role that research is playing in guiding our work. So there's a lot of external research that's happened over the last few years. You may recognize some of these, like the Legislative Economic Review Commission, that are really kind of helping us understand the lay of the land and what best practices are that we should be considering and continuing to explore over the next few years. So that has played a really big role in kind of guiding the development of our work. Internally, on the next slide, I would also name that our growing internal research and data infrastructure has also been a really strong foundation for this work as we're moving forwards. One of the things that we're also developing for this 5-year plan is metrics that we are thinking that we want to track over the next 5 years to really help us measure progress on these goals. And so thinking about using and continuing to build out our KPI dashboard, continuing to do research projects and data briefs from within our own team to think about how we are tracking and growing our work over the next few years. And then I believe the last sort of foundation slide is really this category of IT modernization. So this is something that I know the commissioner mentioned, but we are in the process of designing several kind of updated IT systems to support our work. And so you will see things like our new CCFA family portal, our educator portal, updating our learning management system, and some improvements to the BRC navigator. You will see those in kind of the work that we've stated for moving forwards. We are in the process of creating a lot of those now. So a lot of those we will be launching, we will be continuing to improve and develop and explore over the next few years. Commissioners, is there anything else you'd like to add on sort of the foundations of this work before I jump us into collecting some feedback?
No, you did a great job, and I just interested to hear folks. And I guess I'll just say that the next few slides are very dense. So, and we recognize that, and so we did make an effort to send this out in advance. Not probably enough, but this won't be your last opportunity. So we'd love to hear from you now. We're going to be finalizing it to bring to the board, as Emily said, later in the fall. So this is one opportunity, and then obviously, if there's additional feedback, then we can make staff available to make sure that we've represented the views of the councils as well as possible.
Absolutely. Thank you, Commissioner. So yes, as the Commissioner said, the next few slides are quite packed. I hope many of you have the opportunity to look through them because we could probably spend 30 minutes or an hour on each slide, but we are not going to today. So I'm going to do my best to kind of move us through the slides. As the Commissioner said, we have a short period of time together today, but you have the slides in your email as well. So if there is feedback or comments that you don't have the chance to make in our time together today, please feel free to reach out to me directly after the meeting. I'm happy to either chat via email or collect additional find time for us to chat about any other feedback that you have. So as we go through the next few slides, I'd love folks to just think about these two questions that are on the screen, which I'm also going to paste into the chat. As we're going through, kind of do these goals that you see on the screen feel reflective of your work, your perspective, and your collaborations with EEC? How do you see yourself in the goals and the work streams on the page? And then also, what, if anything, do you think might be missing from the goals and initiatives as they're currently written? For those of you who've already engaged with me in some of these conversations, I hope you will see some of the edits that we have made in response to your feedback, and really just want to hear kind of how you see yourself in these and what you think might be missing so that we can really fine tune these and make them as reflective as possible moving into our final copy. So with that, I'm going to send us into our first slide, which is our family access goals and some examples of work stream. So on the left, you will see our 4 family access goals for the next 5 years. And then on the right, for each of those goals, you'll see a few examples of activities that we're planning on doing over the next 5 years to help us reach those goals. So just going to give folks, a minute or two to read and review from the reviewing you already did. And then we'd just love to hear folks' thoughts, either in the chat or feel free to come off mute to share how these feel reflective to you or things that you feel might be missing. Yes, Kim.
Hello, everyone. Thank you. I have to say thank you again for the slides in advance. I was able to give them a print and take a look, and it made all the difference, to be able to digest a little earlier. So I appreciate that. So one overall comment that I had as I looked through all of the slides, and it did help to see that the bullets on the right are example activities. And obviously a 4-year or 5-year work plan, things have to roll forward and kind of progress. And there's lots of moving parts, but I think it would be helpful to see what the biggest targets are or the first order targets are for EEC and how the resource, how you want to organize resources to get that done and in partnership with the field and all the other partners. So that was one overarching comment that I wanted to offer. And then the second one was, I felt the activities that were listed that really had some type of concrete number, target, range were really clear. And others could you benefit from that. So for instance, like reduce CCFA wait list time. Well, where, from where to where or which part of it, that's such a broad bucket. So how do we think about that? And some of the other ones had more teeth of specificity. And so I just wanted to call that out, but very excited to see the scope of work. There's a lot here too.
Yeah.
So
Thank
wanted
you.
to acknowledge that.
Yes, thank you so much for that. I think you raised two really important questions that we have been sort of grappling with ourselves as we've been developing this. So appreciate the call out. I know we're currently doing a lot of work internally and thinking about kind of project prioritization and sequencing and thinking about how we're best aligning our resources to different projects. So while I don't have a concrete answer for you at this time, I think that is definitely going to be a part of our ongoing work. And I think part of our hope is that by articulating some of these activities now for the next 5 years, we'll give ourselves a little bit more lead time to really figure out that sequencing and prioritization. I also totally hear you on the question around specificity. And that is another thing that we're sort of trying to find the right balance with for some of these where it's easier for us perhaps to make a more specific stated goal, and for others where there are more facets out of our control that we know we want to make an impact, but perhaps can't say exactly how far we'll be able to get given the variety of inputs that might be coming in. So we will definitely take another look, but I appreciate you raising both of those. Seeing a couple questions in the chat that I just want to address. One, these are not in order of priority. They're just ordered for organizational purposes. So we're not saying that goal 1 is more important than goal 2 or 3. We just had to organize them in some way, and that made it easier for us to reference them after the fact.
Emily, let me I just want to go back to Kim's point too, and also the sort of priorities, which is that as you started by saying, Kim, like we might be able to get fairly specific in year 1 about like what are the activities we're working on, how are we deploying our resources, how does the budget match up with what we've done. But the specificity gets less and less as we go over the course of the years. And it doesn't mean we won't add things or take things off or shift things as we go. So, we want to make sure we're clear on sort of what we're able to accomplish in the short term and then where the sort of horizon lives on some of these areas over the longer term, but they won't necessarily change. We will get new legislative directives. We will get additional changing resources in some way, hopefully growth. And that will also drive changes in where we end up in the, over the course of the 5-year period. So there'll be additional opportunities over time.
Yeah, thank you, Commissioner. Patrick?
Yeah, thank you. Can you hear me okay? Okay, yeah. First, thanks for the information. I haven't had a chance to review the full slides, unfortunately, but so my question may be inclusive somewhere else in the presentation. But one thing that stood out to me was, can we include something around helping programs help parents understand the whole system? What we found with a lot of our after-school programs in the OSC space, right, in general, is parents aren't necessarily aware of like what it means for a program to be licensed or unlicensed or license exempt, right? And so what does quality mean in an OSC space? The parents are just like, yeah, kids at the OSC program or after-school program, it's great, I don't have to worry about it, right? So when parents do have questions, sometimes there's a barrier in terms of information available to them from the program. So I just wanted to highlight that.
Yeah, I really appreciate that. I think one of our goals, especially with the family access goal 3 around kind of families having greater access to information about programs, I think hopefully touches on some of what you're talking about, is we want to be making that information about programs more accessible to families. So whether that's improving our childcare search function or just sharing more detailed information about programs and what it means to be licensed and things like that, I think that's very much a part of the work that we want to be focusing on in the next few years. Addison, would you mind sharing your screen again, just so folks who don't have it open on their computer can look at the family access slide? Helen.
Yeah, I did put it in the chat, but I'm gonna repeat it. I don't see where public school preschools fit into all of this. And maybe I'm just not knowing enough about it.
Fitting in general, or?
Yeah, for family access, you want more to maximize the availability of early childhood care, and public schools provide preschool too. But
Yes, absolutely. I think so. When we say early education and care programs on this slide, we are talking about the full range of programs, including FCC programs, out of school time programs, as well as programs that might be based at schools. So for example, CPPI is on here, which is really around our kind of partnerships with public school districts. And also thinking about these goals kind of more broadly around all of the programs that are serving students, including those in schools.
Just in relation to that, and my question, your data graph, the public schools looked like they were 0. Is it just not, you didn't have the information, or, I mean, I know it's not 0, so.
Were you talking about the graph on the previous slide showing our
Correct.
dashboard? Yes. That's just a
Not this one, no.
Yeah, one more back, I think.
Yeah, it's the
You want that
purple
one?
line on the bottom.
Yes, so I think the
I looked at it earlier, that's how I knew it, otherwise I would not have been able to read it.
yes, no, of course. I think the scale is just distorted on this view because it's been made so small. If you look at that on our KPI dashboard, it has the regular number. I'm not sure what that number is at this moment, but I think it's just looking much smaller than it actually is on this view.
Okay,
So,
if you could get that to me, I'd be interested, or maybe to everybody.
Yeah, well, someone can drop the KPI link in the dashboard and you can take a look. It is the scale. I mean, there's a much smaller number of kids being served in the public schools, but this administration is really committed to the mixed delivery system. So it's going to look different in each community as it does through CBPI and through our other programs. So continuing commitment to work with the public schools as well as our community-based programs to expand access. And while I have the mic, I will weigh in a little bit on Laura Pearl's question too. So,
Commissioner,
yeah, go ahead.
Sorry to interrupt. I just also want to clarify, Helen, for you, the dashboard is licensed and funded programs. So these are public school programs where we have a relationship to them. So the broader universe of public school programs aren't going to show up necessarily in this data, so that you're not looking at total enrollment across all public schools when you're looking at that data. It's a subset of public school programs we're connected to.
Right, but since DEC is responsible for all kids 0 to 5, it would be important to have those numbers, even if they're not licensed.
Yep.
To know what that is and to understand, because I think you had like 50% of kids in pre-K programs in one of your graphs. But if you don't count the kids in public school pre-K programs, you're missing 10%, 15%. I don't know the percentage actually now.
Totally. I hear you on that. I'm just contextualizing that line you're looking at isn't the number you're talking about when you're thinking about what that table is. But I hear you, and I think our data team is also very frequently thinking about the total universe of children being served from a capacity standpoint, enrollment, all those things.
Right, because I remember, maybe 15, 20 years ago, 75% of kids had gone through pre-K before they went on to kindergarten. So somehow there's somebody missing here in this.
Good point. We'll make sure that we're representing that accurately in the overall picture of the system as we're putting the full report together. So Kim, I know you have a question. Let me just jump in on Laura's question in the chat. So as you're aware, we are responsible for implementing the budget and the managing within the funding that we receive. And I think it's been the agency's position over the last several years, as you know, to continue to reform childcare financial assistance so that we are creating a human-centered experience. We are decreasing barriers and building the system to be positioned for growth. As we hope additional resources are made available to serve additional income eligible families and again, our families from DCF and DTA. So we spent a lot of time talking about your question exactly, Laura, and how to represent agency's commitment to expanded access while also staying within our measurable control. So, you know, if we are building the technology and the customer service goals and the information so that families can access how they know to get assistance from child care financial assistance, we're doing everything we can to build an easy, accessible system that can grow over time to reach more families as resources become available. And that's been kind of our thought process about how to approach increasing access and meeting our now statutory responsibility for eligibility up to 85%, while we maintain prioritization for lower income families and also our priority populations. Okay, and then welcome to jump in if that was unsatisfactory in a sort of technical way. But Kim.
Thank you. Looking at goal 4, the third bullet, can you just talk a little bit about what you're thinking centralizing and organizing CCFA eligibility processing means?
It's connected to what I was just saying, which is that for many years, families' experiences have been very varied depending on their point of access into the system. And you know, because you've been piloting a lot of our new tools and being part of our user research for the family portal. And as we continue to build a more modern and family-facing technology system, we want a family, regardless if they're in Springfield or Worcester or Lawrence or in Hyannis, to have a similar and common experience around applying for childcare financial assistance, getting information, maintaining childcare financial assistance. And we've made a lot of progress, I think, on kind of centralizing that experience and making sure that our CCR&Rs and our contactor providers have tools, but a lot of that has been, I would say, Band-Aids or bridges to a future where we might have a truly integrated single system that families can easily access, get information, you know, pretty soon with our family portal, people will be able to tell where they are. And eventually we hope it'll be a very easy single experience that is facilitated by our contracted providers and our CCR&Rs supporting families to be able to access that more centralized experience.
Given time, I'm going to shift us to our next slide, which is around program quality. But as I said earlier, if folks have additional thoughts on the family access things, I'm happy to connect after this conversation. So same questions here for our 4 program quality goals, which you'll see on the right, on the left, and then a few examples of the work on the right. Curious to hear if folks have any reflections on things that they're excited to see or things that they have questions about or feel might be missing. Pat, thank you for the question in the chat. My understanding is a big focus of the family portal is going to be language accessibility. So yes, that is one of our big focus areas.
Molly?
Yes.
So in regards to the licensing regulations, particularly for OST, is that continuing the conversation that we've had in the past? Or is it a new direction?
That is a great question.
Sorry, Jen, can you say that again? Sorry.
Sure. We've had some discussion about OST regulations and licensing in the past, and so I'm wondering if that model that was presented, is that what we're revisiting, or are you looking at something new potentially?
Well, the childcare licensing regulations are under probably what will be a multi-year revision process. And I think our intention with the out of school time ones, as we said, is sort of pull them out of group and school age so they can be dedicated after school and out of school time regulations, and or at least very tailored to the unique circumstances that our out of school time programs experience, like operating in the public schools and having separate sets of rules around playgrounds and other things, like some of the issues that you all have raised so eloquently with us, and MAP as well. So the regulatory process is arduous and slow. So I don't think it's going to be this year, but it's in the queue for the 5 years that our regulations are easier to access, simpler, and more responsive to the users who are responsible for implementing them, and then also our staff who are responsible for overseeing them. So we've had a lot of questions and conversations about making sure that the regs for out of school time are responsive to the unique experience of our out of school time programs.
Thank you.
And there'll be lots of engagement opportunities available when we get to that. When we get to that,
Sure. I appreciate that. Emily, while I have the floor, just some other considerations or food for thought around continuous quality improvement and training. Being involved with the national organization, you can quite imagine some of the requirements that our staff deal with as it relates to our own CQI program and training regulations. And so sometimes we hear maybe pushback's not the right word, but we receive feedback on, having to do multiple requirements for different agencies around the same thing. So just some thought about, again, opportunities for feedback on what we're already doing in that area, and is there a way to kind of synthesize around those topics?
I appreciate that call out, Jen. Thank you for naming that. Jocelyn, I see a couple of comments in the chat that I wondered if you wanted to speak to around kind of the intersection with literacy launch and our kind of support system pilot ideas. Wondered if you have any thoughts that you wanted to share on those.
Sorry, reading the questions right now.
Yeah, no worries.
So with literacy launch, the structure of the preschool component of literacy launch, although there are many different PRISM grants that are all in different places, so it is a little confusing. But the basic structure and set of expectations that undergird those is that public schools will work with community-based programs in the same way they do with CPPI. It's just a program that's much more tightly focused around literacy instruction, the use of curriculum and assessments in preschool settings. But it is designed to follow the same basic logic as CPPI does. Feel free, please, to jump in if I'm not fully responding to the question while I read the next one.
I think the next one was really around the credentialing system and how we'll be coordinating.
Yeah, so one of the things that I think is undergirding all of the quality work, and I think as overwhelming as it is to redo everything all at once, it's one of the nice benefits, is that we are seeing the credential really as part of our quality initiative. It is a foundational component of the work because it's where we're really defining the skills and developing and providing the support systems for educators at all levels of their profession to build those skills. I think, as we talk about the competencies, I think we've talked about the fact that the educator competencies that we've been identifying follow the same domains as the domains of quality that we've been talking about for a number of years. So we're not talking about two different systems. We're really trying to make sure that these systems are working together. So I think, Bino, in response to your question, the starting place for defining, like if you want to scratch under the surface of our sort of domain summaries that we've been relying on for those different categories, a starting place to do that is to look at the educator competencies, because that is really where we're defining the specifics of what it means to be an educator and to make sure that these things happen. And then as we build out the systems of support for program leaders and ensuring that their educators are learning and growing as professionals. We'll also think about, sort of how do you define this at a program level and support the CQI work at the program level. And then Kim asks about the always tricky question of measurement. I think the thing that so again, we are trying as a starting place in building out the quality system, and the credentialing system is really focusing on the practice and the ways in which we can support professionals in growing their practice. And a lot of that work is about making sure that there are clear opportunities to practice skills and get feedback on those skills. At this moment in time, we are not driving towards a high stakes observational based system. Observational tools are important tools that can be used to support decisions about ongoing continuous quality improvement. And we're also looking into the ways in which we as a state agency need to think about how we are holding ourselves accountable to understanding the effects of the decisions that we're making and the support systems that we're making. So, I mean, I think those of you that are working with us through the CCFA contract know that one thing that we are rolling out, and we do have this in CPPI programs and other places, we do use the class tool just to get an understanding systemically of what does quality look like and how do we see quality change over time. But we're not using that tool as a tool to hold programs accountable to certain levels of class scores. It's really a tool for us to support our own system building.
Thank you, Jocelyn. I'm going to shift us to our next slide just because we have a few more to get through. But again, happy to chat offline with folks if there are more questions or around the quality goal. So this slide has our 3 goals around program stability. I will again give folks a minute or two to kind of review, and curious to hear questions, concerns, feedback on our program stability goals and work streams. Yes, Kim.
Hello again. So this goal popped up for me also, and it came up in a couple of other goals, kind of an overarching wondering for the strategic plan, and that is how the department might leverage some strategic partners or external resources to move this work in an accelerated, high quality fashion, because the list's piling up of how many moves have to be made to get to any one of these things. So I think about, an example of this is in goal 3, second bullet, create a funding map covering how the field's different funding streams come together. Long been a dream now for me for a couple of years. Could we get a fiscal map? Can we partner with an organization like the Children's Funding Project? It's been brought up in different calls or meetings, but it just reminded me to figure out if there's a way to articulate in this if and how the department wants to leverage some strategic external partners to help accelerate the work in step with what we need to do, but realizing that there's only so many folks inside the department to get all of this done.
Absolutely, and I appreciate you naming it. That is definitely something that's sort of in the introduction part of our report. We have framed of all of this work is work that we need to be doing in collaboration with our various partners and stakeholders. I think you'll see that very explicitly on the slide within goal 2 as sort of pursuing public-private partnerships and thinking about kind of more different approaches to funding. But I think exactly what you named, partnerships, is going to be a big priority for ours kind of across all of these. I think the commissioner also came off mute.
Yeah, I just want to reiterate that, which is, the apprenticeship work is a good example, right? We don't want to build internally what somebody else externally could do better, has the experience and expertise to do. And I think it's been our assumption and operating strategy that like we need a much bigger boat than EEC alone can build. So where we have external partners, whether it's our public schools or our community-based programs, or whether it's professional learning in the community colleges or our formal workforce system or business front door, we're sort of looking for who the partners are that can deliver the things that we are driving towards and leading. We want it to be stable and accessible and equitable, and who are the partners that can help us build towards that, even on the quality side of things. I think we would be leaning into our community partners to help us if and when we got to a place that we were really defining measures and thinking about what the supports were to be able to get there. It's not going to be done down at Milk Street. Either the setting of the goal or the delivery of the services, and the simplest way to say it. So,
and I'll call out that's true for goal 1 too. I think that's there's a lot of small business supports in many different places, and the business front door work is a perfect example of a set of supports that then we're working to tailor for the early ed field. But I do think a lot of that work is looking at what's already available and thinking about how do we work with whoever is offering the services to make it appropriate and useful to very specific portions of the early ed field, like family childcare educators. But anybody is free to email with me with ideas. Just saying.
Thanks, Jocelyn.
Yes.
Helen.
Yeah, I have a question about the capital grant strategy and what that's about exactly. And then I'll follow up with another question, maybe first.
We have an existing, the early education and out of school time capital grant program that we've been running since, I would say 2013, right?
Is that the one with the license plates?
No,
Oh.
this is funded through the capital investment program, the SIP from the state capital investment. And under this governor, it's gone from 4 to 6 to now 10 million annually. We have large grants, we have small grants that build in licensed programs. And last year we ran a capital grant program, thanks to the legislature, for our for-profit programs that were serving a high percentage of children receiving childcare financial assistance. And then, as I said at the beginning, rolling out our first ever family childcare capital grant program. So recognizing the need for capital investments at our programs, using the resources that are provided to make sure we're supporting healthier, greener environments, new capacity, better spaces, more child-centered spaces. So capital is a big part of our strategy in terms of program operations.
And is there any coordination between MSBA and you guys in terms of early childhood public school programs? Or
the statute is pretty clear on our EOS program that it's for either nonprofits or for-profit, so it's not available to the public schools right now, like the MSBA is not available.
The MSBA, I don't think it should be, to be honest. I mean, this is one area where I'm not pushing for that. I think that, it's not appropriate, but just to make sure that school districts are aware that MSBA will pay for early childhood programs if school districts put it into their educational plan.
Right. So a lot. I think it's an important broader point that you started and you're reiterating now, which is that as we're continuing to build access in the mixed delivery system, that we're paying attention to all the resources that are available to improve spaces, including the public schools, and also expanding access. So opportunity to work with our new commissioner in K-12 as well.
That's right. Thank you.
Any other questions or concerns on the program stability goals and work streams? Okay, seeing none, I'm gonna have us move to our workforce supports slide. You're used to the questions at this point, so take a look. Curious to hear if folks have feedback, questions on here.
Could you, Emily, speak to a little bit more about the salary scale model and what would be informing that, or?
I'm going to pass that to Jocelyn, who has been heavily
I was just
involved.
waiting for that question.
Sorry, Jocelyn.
No, I'm happy to talk about it. I think it's important that we do.
And the reason I ask is because nationally we have our own job classification management program. So I'm just
Yeah, so
wondering.
the salary scale work that is currently in process is responsive to language in the statute from this sort of past year, which required EEC to create a salary scale with some requirements about what the salary scale accomplishes. So it needs to, sort of build to commensurate levels with the public school salaries. And we also recognized that this was an opportunity while we were developing a credential to start thinking about, okay, if we're building a credential, how would we want to see the salary? What would we want to see the salary progression look like in the context of the credential? So we have been working with the team at AAR to develop sort of a draft version of that meets the requirements and the expectations. That is aligned with the new roles that we're sort of building in the credential. And the next stage in that work is really to start thinking about, okay, what do we do with this tool? There is an expectation at some point in time, again, in the same statute, that we would think about, how we might make use of C3 as a mechanism to support more explicitly programs moving towards new salary scale expectations. So that's really, I think, the next stage of the conversation is like, all right, we have a starting place. What do we do with it? Where do we see the opportunities? I think in response to your very specific questions about the out of school time space, I don't feel like we've even identified exactly where the credential roles fit in the out of school time space yet to be able to say something concrete about salary expectations. But I think you raise a very good point, and I'm sort of making a note to myself that I do think as we should think about all of those things together as we're thinking about where and how the credential speaks to the out of school time space, and also understand some of the other compensation expectation systems that you're working with. Awesome.
And Steve, I wonder if you could just say a little more about what kind of outcomes we would like us to be measuring on BRC. I have an idea, but.
If we could have, and I apologize, I'm in my car, that's why I'm off camera. But if we could have a sense of how long it will take with like a backstop of if it's more than 15 days, what's a reasonable amount of time from EEC's perspective? So as we're screening and trying to hire folks, we're not stuck in limbo.
Yeah, I totally appreciate that. And that is definitely part of the conversation that's been happening inside that for somebody, I mean, you probably all are aware that a lot of the modernization efforts have resulted in candidates that have no hits on their background. Those can pass within 24 hours, almost immediately, which is great. And that's been a lot of the upgrading we've been working on over the last several years. And now we're sort of digging deeper into the system about what expectations can we have. We've been adding additional staff and training. We've been updating modernization efforts. So I think one of our next steps is really to try and think about what could be reasonable expectations and how could they be communicated in terms of timelines. I don't think we're quite at that point yet in terms of the capacity that we have, but that's been kind of our focus to make sure we have enough staff to actually keep up with what's coming in and going out. And we don't need to get into the details of the BRC, although happy to talk about that other way. But, EEC, we have federal rules that govern the background record checks for staff working in childcare and early education and out of school time programs that are different than what the background record check requirements are for the schools. There are also background record checks for staff working in DYS and foster care. So there's a lot of background record checks happening across state government, and there is effort to try and make sure that we are consistent in how we're treating those things and even thinking about transferability. But some of the individual systems are really designed to comply with the specific requirements around the systems that we're managing.
Yeah, no, I absolutely get how complicated it is. The goal is to have, as the plan evolves, to have just measurable expectations for everybody. So we all live amongst the same, you know, rules,
And-
basically.
And
Timelines,
transparent.
calendars.
Right, so programs and candidates can also know where they are in the process and what's missing, and there's a lot of things we can do to kind of improve the business process while still complying with federal requirements. So recognizing that it's been a high priority for us to attend to it is the front door to the workforce system. And so people need to be able to get through it to get onto the other parts of it that we're building too. We recognize. So thanks, Steve. I appreciate the question. Cheryl?
Everyone, welcome back.
Hi.
So came so quick. So for the BRC, I'm wondering if I know there's on some of the websites, it shows that there's a dedicated admin at some centers. Would it be possible to down the road maybe add representatives at institutes of higher education? Or so I'm thinking like we do practicums and we have to have them do their we require it to be within 6 months. So their Corey Sori and then their fingerprints. And then the students are, if we had access to their information, like not to edit their information, but just be able to get some sort of a report, like put in their name and their, social that they give us. And then we can see what they have so that we're not doubling up and having them unnecessarily go in and pull their reports or have someone at their job pull them. If that's potentially possible.
Yeah, I mean, background record check information is highly protected, as you're aware. So I think, we are spending a lot of time thinking about like what is the role of the programs that are hiring, and what is the role of the candidates, and what's the role of the agency to make sure that if there's a role the program could play that could expedite within the confidentiality rules of our background record check system, then we're interested in making sure programs are right at the forefront of that, working closely with their candidates, but it's tricky.
So my understanding that the actual, I call them a student, but the employer doesn't have access to this in like their own portal if they filed?
That's probably a more detailed question than we can take on right here.
Okay. No worries.
But why don't we, Cheryl,
Okay.
we can follow up and maybe we
Okay.
could get a deeper understanding of what you're experiencing and where
Okay.
that intersects with us.
Perfect. Thank you.
Sure.
Any other feedback or questions on our workforce supports goals?
Emily, it's Kate Marie from the YMCA.
Yeah.
Sorry, I'm also in the car like Steve. And I think I just want to make a note as we talk about the pay scale and as we get closer to kind of that being implemented, just to acknowledge that organizations like ours are so large. So we do like the Boys and Girls Club, we have our own pay scales, but we have so many other streams of business that it's going to be really hard for us to match like an EEC specific pay scale. When we have to match with lifeguards and fitness. And so we just have so many other areas. So just something to bring up as we start to look at that for the larger organizations that do more things. Our pay scales will be different.
It's a great point, Kate Marie. And I think you have that in a lot of the community action agencies and other places that have, are running multiple kinds of work streams in business, in addition to childcare and early education or out of school time. So it's a great flag. All right, Emily, you want to take us home here?
Yes, the final slide, last but not least. This slide is around agency infrastructure, which is really around EEC's own internal capacity and structures and perspectives to really carry out this work. So again, you see things on here that are around like training or professional development. This is for EEC internal staff. We'll do the same. Curious what folks appreciate seeing here, questions that folks have, or things that seem to be missing. Holding wait time on Zoom is always a challenge. Are there any questions or feedback on these agency infrastructure goals and work streams? Kim, great question in the chat. I believe so, yes. So we're thinking about our EEC staff and the skills and professional development that they have access to grow and improve in their roles. So that would definitely apply to help desk staff as well. We give another few seconds. Okay. Oh, yes, Pat.
Good afternoon, everybody. I've enjoyed looking at these slides, and I've seen the word inclusion mentioned on several slides. I don't know if you're defining inclusion the same way I would define inclusion, in that it includes kids of all abilities in programs. And so I'm eager to hear what supports will be implemented throughout your strategic plan around supporting children with disabilities in community-based programs. I know the CPPI grant is ripe to do that, but I've not seen anything specific about strengthening the field in working with kids with disabilities, infants, toddlers, preschoolers, school-age kids with disabilities. So I wonder if you could comment on that.
I mean, I can turn it over to Jocelyn too, but I think we'd turn it around to ask for your help in some ways, Pat. I mean, of course, I learned my definition of inclusion from you way back when, so it would have been, you know, we are committed to meeting the social, emotional, behavioral health needs of all the kids in the programs with the resources that we have available. So would welcome your kind of expertise in looking through the strategic plan and make sure that we have the language right, if not the resources yet, and that we're directing our strategies towards making sure that our programs are both as inclusive as possible, and also that the teachers and the program administrators have the supports and tools they need to meet kids where they are and serve them in the least restrictive setting.
The Federation's happy to play along.
Great.
Yeah, I think I can just add, I mean, we are certainly always
Right.
looking at the ways in which we can pay attention to how the services that are available to children are also integrated into, and that the lines of communication are there. I think that there's just a lot of really complex, and I know you know this, system integration around thinking deeply about the nature of access. When you're talking about infants and toddlers, you're thinking about the relationship between the expertise that comes from EI home visitors and educators working with children, and where and how those services are provided. When you're talking about preschool special education, you're now working with the districts, but it's the same basic conversation. And there's a lot of work to do there. CPPI has been the leading edge for us on the special education side for preschool. But I think that it is a really, really interesting conversation, and echo the commissioner's statement that we really welcome support from everybody on that.
Thank you, Pat. Patrick.
Yeah, so I see under goal 1, you mention develop, enroll an internal EEC training professional development unit. Just the term unit kind of sparked me to think about perhaps focusing on something around an OST unit. I know OST expertise is kind of sprinkled around EEC, and I know you've been trying to hire the ASOS professional for a while now. But I think it would be great to explicitly state it here, some sort of objective to coalesce around OST within EEC. That's like kind of, you know, that's its name and it's clearly identified. So just a thought.
Maybe there's something we can do to make sure that we're reflecting that the expertise at the agency reflects the diversity of the field, so that there's out of school time, family childcare, group and school age, those knowledgeable about working with the public schools and working with children with special needs, kind of to Pat's earlier point. So I think we can, we have not been successful in hiring that out of school time professional, although we really, really wanted to do that. So we have been kind of committed to making sure that we have the resources that are much more responsive, whether it's to our family childcare educators or at a school time. So I think we can reflect that here, and hope that hiring freeze gets lifted at some point. Great point. Okay.
All right. I think with that, I'm gonna wrap us up. I'm gonna thank you all so much for your feedback, for your questions, for your thoughts. I will put my email in the chat, so if folks have additional comments, concerns, questions around the goals and work streams, if you have a little bit more time to look into the slide deck after this conversation, I would welcome further conversations or communications around that as we are kind of putting together our official final draft. But just want to appreciate you all for the time and feedback today, as well as for those of you who've had previous conversations with me over the last couple of months. I found it incredibly valuable to hear from all of you. So thank you for taking the time, and excited to get this out the door.
Thanks, Emily. Bean'll drop the last quick question in, and unit is an overstatement. We hired EEC's first ever director of learning and training and development this year, and long overdue that we have a training team at the agency that's really internally focused. It's not about the early education care workforce, but we have 300 staff, the majority of which are licensing, very complicated regulations, and we haven't had a training program or training team. So we started with a director, and we hope to be able to build that unit so that we're continuing to support the competency of the EEC workforce internally, both around our technical needs, but also working effectively with our community partners as well. So we started with one, and hope to build around that person. Okay, I'm going to stop there and just say again, feel free to reach out to Emily. Jocelyn, also happy to talk about some of the program quality and stability and workforce, which really sits under her leadership. Obviously, we have teams who are dedicated to each of these key strategic goals. So additional thoughts coming out or more detailed conversations, for example, around the BRC or something else that folks want to follow up on, really open to doing that. And just going to say again that, you know, we will have to submit this document because it is a statutory requirement. It's been a good exercise for us to go through to really think about what we want to do today, tomorrow, and next. But it will be a living document, and it will change as resources change, capacity changes, and statutory directions come in and other things. So, and as you all change and grow what you're doing out in the field. So, okay. Let's move on to C3. So Jocelyn, back to you.
Great, thank you. And I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this because I'm going to take a guess that most people on this call are probably familiar with where we are. But just a reminder that, you know, as we look ahead to FY26, we have been spending a lot of time over the past year talking about directions for C3. We have also received a fair amount of statutory language in the FY25 budget that we are accommodating and adjusting to, and we've been thinking about what the data is telling us in terms of directions and where we have to go. So a few things that we do need to pay attention to and we'll be attending to in the coming changes for FY26, which right now we're looking at November as the point when we would change anything that will change. The first and most important thing, and I'll spend the rest of the presentation talking about this a bit, but we do need to start using a formal board review process with public comment to make any changes to a formula. But first of all, we have to formally establish a formula through this process because we never have done that. And it does make sense as a first step to formalizing and moving this program into a more sort of routine set of processes around changing it. We do also have to ensure that all programs receiving C3 demonstrate a willingness to enroll children receiving childcare financial assistance. This is now a legislative requirement of funding, and we are working on an approach to an attestation that will address this requirement again starting in November. And we have a sort of longer term expectation, and I referenced this earlier in the presentation, we were talking about the salary scale, to encourage programs to start meeting salary benchmarks. So that is something else that we have been thinking about. And Amy, do you have a question for this slide?
Thanks, Jocelyn. Just a quick clarifying question. Is the reason you said, I think, because it's now in statute, that triggers the public comment?
Sorry, there is a requirement,
right?
To make any further, to both establish a formula and make any further changes to the formula, we need to work with the board and use the public comment process to do that.
And was there any trigger for that, or that just is now because you're looking at the formula?
No, that came through the budget language in.
Okay, I just want to make sure, because I think that's really important about why this feels different than other times.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Yep. You can go to the next slide. So having done that thinking, here are the steps forward that we are in the middle of in planning for FY26. So the first step is to establish the current formula, as we were just discussing. We recognize that we're working in a level funded budget. So, there isn't additional money coming to the table. We're really, sort of working to maintain. There have been significant changes recently in past years in the formula, and we recognize that stability is really important for something that plays such an important role in operational budgets. So we want to put forward the current formula, and this is what we have put forward through current for public comment. We are actually in the middle of that process. And are really encouraging everybody to come in and share the perspectives and the feedback that should be considered as we think about C3. I think one thing, having looked at some of the public comment that has come through, that has been really helpful in starting and sort of setting the foundation of this is where we are and this is our starting place, is it has provided an opportunity to really gather good feedback about what C3 has accomplished and also points of consideration for the future. So we will take public comment both to sort of make a determination is continuing with the current formula the right step for FY26, but the public comment will also feed conversation and decisions about FY27 as well. We are also making some programmatic adjustments to be aligned with the statutory requirements that I just spoke to, and to continue managing to our funding levels, which again, as I called out, we are level funded this year. We are adding into the application process. And again, we are looking to November as a point in time where we re-up the application. This is a chance for programs to put in all their information again. Grant monthly funding calculations will be updated with that information at that point in time. And we will include an attestation that asks programs to attest that they would be willing to accept a child with childcare financial assistance if they have an opening in their program and a child came to their program with an interest in participating, who also had access to childcare financial assistance. We are also revisiting our fund use requirements. There are some categories of allowable fund use. They're pretty broad. And adding in an expectation that a significant percentage of C3 funds get invested in workforce investments. And this is something in looking at the data that we have, programs are already doing largely. So we would not set a threshold that goes above and beyond what we see as being feasible for programs. But it is a first step towards the directive that we've received to start encouraging the investment of this funding in workforce. And finally, we continue to manage access to new providers. So we currently have a process whereby every quarter new providers, we assess whether we have enough funding to open C3 to new providers. And we will continue to do that into the next fiscal year. Go to the next slide. So this is a timeline, and you can see that we are very close to our public hearing that is happening at the end of the public comment period. So we presented we opened up the public comment in August, and Amy, you can see the statutory language here as well, which is the very concrete answer to your question. So we've went to the board and had over the summer and had approval to put the current formula out for public comment. It is now out and available. There will be a hearing next Monday in the evening, and Eugenia is putting the information about that in the chat right now. And we are still accepting written comment as well. We will take the public comment. We'll give ourselves a little bit of time to digest it and bring a final decision about where we should, or recommendation about where we should go in November to the board for a vote in October. And then, as I mentioned, November would be the point in time where the application would change. We would recalculate monthly funding awards and then reinstate the process that we've had in place this year, whereas those recalculated amounts become programs, monthly payments that do not change for the rest of the year. Kim is asking what a significant percentage means. Right now, we're looking at 50% of C3 going into workforce investments. It includes, your current payroll, investments in benefits, and professional learning as well. Go to the next slide. So just as a quick reminder, this is the current formula that we've put forward. So the top row is the formula that defines the monthly funding calculation. Program's license capacity is the base of this, so the formula is calculated around the size of the program. We did introduce adjustments around enrollment in the most recent fiscal year, and again, we're not proposing changing anything. But if a center-based program, for example, is at less than 75% of enrollment, then the grant award is prorated down based on actual enrollment as reported. And it is based on an annual average. So we continue to collect enrollment information monthly so that when we come to November, we can calculate a new annual average for everybody. Then we have a base rate. There are different base rates based on program type, whether a program's full-time or part-time, the ages that a program serves for center-based, or the staffing for an FCC program. That's multiplied by the license capacity, and then there is an inequity adjustment that's another multiplier that's based on program characteristics such as whether the amount of children with CCFA the program serves, whether the program's located in a very low opportunity area, whether it's a Head Start program, as well as this is where the calculation of the ratio of compensation between the CEO or the highest paid employee and the lowest paid educator factors in. And if programs exceed a 30-to-1 ratio, then there are no equity adjustments available to the program. And this collectively defines the monthly payment. And then there is also we do also look at the annual funding that programs receive, because the budget language does require us to ensure that any program that is operating more than 10 sites is restricted to only receiving 1% of C3. So we do continue to track over the course of the year how much programs are receiving. And so far, we've only put it in place in a few instances, but towards the end of the fiscal year, funding might be cut off because the cap has been reached. You can go to the next slide. So again, here are the details of the public comment period. I think we can leave the slide up so people can see, but we do have the public hearing coming up, and it is on Zoom Monday evening. There are no salary benchmarks being proposed for this year. We are just proposing that 50% of your C3 funding be used to support workforce-related costs in the program. And most programs are already using C3 for those costs. All right, well, thank you. I encourage everybody to submit your thoughts on C3. I think the public comment is going to be incredibly helpful to us, both again for the immediate decision, but also as we start to think about where C3 is going in FY27.
Okay, any questions or further comments on C3 or what the agency is proposing for 26? Again, you know, we will, because this is an annual requirement, and it was really our thought that we should maintain stability for this year and propose. We've had so many changes over the last couple of years, just maintain stability, the existing formula. That's what we'll be recommending to our board. But we will be weighing into all the public comment to understand what we're learning, what we're hearing, encourage people to come to the board meeting, use the public comment period, but you can also use public comment period at the board to weigh in as well. We would anticipate, based on the feedback that we get, that we will propose likely changes for next fiscal year. So there'll probably be an additional public comment period in the spring. So it won't be the last opportunity for folks to kind of weigh in on where we are. And the public comment period is sort of specific in the statute to the formula, but obviously we will consider all comments that we receive in terms of eligibility, fund use, and other things as we think about what the program looks like in 27 and beyond. And just reiterating again, we're so fortunate in Massachusetts to have the Commonwealth Cares for Children program. You know, there are many other states who hit this federal cliff when that program ended at the federal level, and Massachusetts stepped up, support from our legislators, and funded this program. And it is new, it is young, and we are in the growth and maturity stage of this program, learning, you know, and just thanks to everyone who submits your data, because we're using that to drive understanding of you know, how the program is meeting the goals that we established or how it isn't. And I'm happy about the public comment period and having it in statutes. Formalizing the program gives an opportunity for we've been engaging with stakeholders on a regular basis, but this provides a real open and transparent public period associated with this program. So we intend to take it seriously and appreciate all your engagement in that process. Okay. I think our last agenda item is just looking at this calendar for the rest of the fiscal year, right, Addison?
Yes, it is, Commissioner. So I have sent this in my email to both councils. This is just an overview of the Advisory Council meeting dates and also the Workforce Council meeting dates. In addition to that, I've also sent, and I will send again, the link to the respective links to the website that each recording and materials are all posted as well. And as a follow-up to this meeting, I will email both the materials, the links, and everything, and then you guys can all see the dates to the corresponding meetings on there as well. If you have any further questions, please don't hesitate to reach out. But yeah, as a nice little wrap up, Commish, do you have any further thoughts?
Just open the floor for a minute if you want to stop sharing the slide, we'll open the floor for anything off the agenda that we didn't cover that you have questions about, or things you want to make sure are put on the agenda for the next council meetings. Open to that. Anything else on your minds? Okay, well, I think we have a little bit of summer left outside, so maybe you can use these extra 20 bonus minutes to get a little bit of vitamin D, which we all need here in New England. So just thank you all again for your time today and for adapting to the shifting schedule, for your thoughtful engagement in the strategic action plan. I know I can't represent everything, but I hope everyone saw a little bit of the work that we've been doing and that you all have been doing over the years reflected there. And we will continue to stay together and move onward. So thanks, everyone. Have a good rest of your Thursday, and we'll see you all soon.
Thank you.